One of the interesting aspects of House of the Dragon is the show's comparison of the dragons to nuclear weapons. We see this in the carnage and the aftermath of any battles involving dragons, and when Rhaenyra talks about how getting more dragons will deter the other side from using theirs. Any kind of comparison of medieval times to modern times may seem weird, especially given House of the Dragon's fantastical setting. In terms of sheer destructive power, the dragons are no match for the world-ending potential of nuclear weapons. I still think the comparison works on a metaphorical level. There is a link between the fiery destruction of both the dragons and nuclear weapons, and I think that fire as an element works as a metaphor for humankind's relationship with technology. Part of what inspired me to make this video is some fan theories looking at the possibility of the dragons being made rather than evolving from other creatures. If these theories are true, then we could say that dragons are a kind of technology. House of the Dragon is based on a section of the book Fire and Blood that chronicles the history of the Targaryens in Westeros. Fire and Blood is also the official saying of House Targaryen. These words are rich with meaning. What does it cost to wield all that power? It's interesting that many of our myths concerning the origins of fire involve humans stealing it from gods or animals. The most famous of the fire-stealing myths is the one of the Titan Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humans. There are different accounts of the myth, but the stealing of fire from the gods, either through trickery or defiance, remains consistent. Why is the stealing of fire a common theme in fire origin myths? I think it's because of the many possibilities that fire as technology opens up. These possibilities give humanity the ability to defy nature. We take a reaction that happens in nature and use it for our own ends, for better or worse. This power to defy nature can just about be controlled, and can also spiral out of control, much like the dragons in House of the Dragon. Despite the close bonds that the riders form with their dragons, they are basically kept as weapons. The dragon pits may as well be nuclear bunkers. There are tragic incidents of people trying to claim dragons, and there are also quite a few accidents related to nuclear power. Fire can at times burn too hot and too bright. Another property of fire that I want to highlight is that it needs fuel to keep burning. This is where the blood in Fire and Blood comes in. What needs to be sacrificed for the burning to continue? I use the word sacrifice here because when something is burned, it can't return to what it was before. I mentioned that there are fan theories speculating that the dragons were created. If these theories are true, then a lot was sacrificed to make the dragons. The Targaryens are descended from the ancient civilization known as the Valyrian Freehold. The Valyrians were ruthless people who kept slaves to mine ore underneath the volcanoes known as the 14 Flames. Consider this quote from Fire and Blood. The Valyrians were more than dragon lords. They practiced blood magic and other dark arts as well, delving deep into the earth for secrets best left buried, and twisting the flesh of beasts and men to fashion monstrous and unnatural chimeras. This quote comes from Septon Barth, a priest and a scholar who believed that dragons were made from creatures called wyverns. The Valyrians clearly didn't care what or who was sacrificed if it meant that they could increase their power. Ultimately, the Valyrians themselves were sacrificed in a cataclysmic event known as the Doom of Valyria, when all 14 of the volcanoes erupted at once. While the doom could have just been a natural disaster, it could also have been caused by the actions of the Valyrians that were mentioned in that quote. Viserys certainly seems to think so.
The idea that we control the dragons is an illusion. They are a power man should never have trifled with. One that brought Valyria its doom.
The Targaryens of the present day of the show continue the bloody legacy of their ancestors in their own ways. We see the destructive fire of the dragons sacrificing dozens of men. It's worth noting that the dragons are not the most precise of weapons, so the dragon riders have probably burned men on their own side. When the dragons have had to land for whatever reason, the dragon riders don't seem to care that they could trample on their own men. Rhaenys didn't seem to care that she killed dozens of people when she burst out of the dragon pit. We could also talk about the people's sacrifice so that Rhaenyra could secure more dragon riders. She first sacrifices one of her Kingsguard, believing him to have a trace of noble Targaryen blood. She then gathers a group of small folk to try and bond with the dragons, most of which don't make it out alive. While she is troubled by their deaths, she no doubt sees them as necessary. This forging ahead, without really thinking of the consequences, defines the modern relationship with technology. Given House of the Dragon's references to nuclear weaponry, we can think about not only the effects of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also the effects of nuclear testing. Nuclear tests were conducted with little consideration for the people living nearby. Nuclear fire is the brightest, hottest, and most destructive fire that humanity can produce, yet many tests were conducted. Many people have suffered from the radioactive fallout. Scientists have died from smaller-scale tests involving a radioactive plutonium core that was going to be used for an atomic bomb. They would see how close they could bring the core to critical mass. This process was nicknamed tickling the dragon's tail. I've been thinking about humanity's playing with fire when it comes to technology for a while now. This thinking has led me to books such as Paul Virilio's The Original Accident. He has this interesting idea of the accident being a part of technology and not just an unexpected event. According to Aristotle, the accident reveals the substance. If so, then invention of the substance is equally invention of the accident. The shipwreck is consequently the futurist invention of the ship, and the air crash the invention of the supersonic airliner. Just as the Chernobyl meltdown is the invention of the nuclear power station. This seems obvious and not so obvious at the same time. Of course, new technologies present new dangers, but do we operate as if we are aware of this? I'm not so sure when one of the most famous sayings related to technology is, "Move fast and break things." We seem to just gleefully light the fires and then act horrified when we get burned. Just look at Kristen Cole after the horrors that he witnessed.
The dragons dance, and men are like dust under their feet. We march now toward our annihilation.
Is there a way of being more aware of the accident, as Virilio describes it? Fire works well as a basic metaphor for our relationship with technology, because for a long time fire was at the center of practical life. Whether it be for cooking, warmth, farming, or ceremonial purposes, the open flame was at the center of culture for many societies. As we moved into modernity, the flames became hidden in things like combustion chambers. Stephen J. Pine talks about this transition in his book, Fire, A Brief History. According to Pine, this is the transition from what he calls second fire to third fire. Second fire involves harnessing the fire that can occur naturally to your own ends, the open flame. Third fire is fire that cannot occur naturally. It is industrial fire that uses materials like coal and petroleum. With this change from second fire to third fire, there surely must be a change in thinking about fire. Second fire societies no doubt have a sense of responsibility to fire because of its central role in practical and symbolic life. This sense of responsibility is lacking in third fire societies because fire is less overtly central. Fire is less overtly central, but it still plays an important technological role, which is why it can also come to symbolize our relationship with technology. If our sense of responsibility to fire has gone, then our relationship with technology does not have this sense of responsibility either. We do not see ourselves as keepers of the flame, but merely users of tools. It is clear today that technology is not just a set of tools. The technologies we use deeply affect us, and we affect them, which in turn has new effects on us, and on it goes in a feedback loop. We are clearly entangled up to a point where seeing ourselves as mere users of tools is an inadequate way of thinking. The idea of the keeper of the flame brings a sense of responsibility. Fire in other forms more resembles a domesticated species. It must be birthed, tended, trained. It compels people to change their own habits to accommodate it. It derives its power from its surroundings. Field fires have more in common with oxen than axes. The hearth fire cannot be put on a shelf as a hammer can. It is more akin to a draft horse that needs a barn, feed, currying, and bridle. Tending to a fire means that you recognize its dangers and won't be reckless with it. The dragons in House of the Dragon are living, breathing creatures. They are fire and blood. The Targaryens, however, see them as nukes. Seeing the dragons as weapons to be deployed has already resulted in destructive consequences. It will only get worse as they continue to stockpile more dragons. The Targaryens only see how destructive their use of dragons is against their enemies or when people fail to bond with them. They don't see how self-destructive their use of dragons is. This is what Viserys feared when he said the power the Valyrians had caused the Doom of Valyria. Keeping with fire as a basic metaphor, what will happen if we continue to see ourselves as just users of the flame and not keepers of it? If the fire is just something to be deployed, then we aren't watching close enough for ways that the flame can burn us. Being keepers of the flame would at the bare minimum involve a careful and proactive monitoring of the effects of technology. This is not a call to go back to our pre-industrial use of technology. We are too entangled to go back. To be a keeper of the flame is to recognize that we are a part of something rather than apart from something that we simply use for our own ends. If we are entangled with technology and the environment around us, then we realize that a bad relationship with them will have dire consequences for us. If we truly recognize how the flame shapes us and how we shape the flame, then perhaps the accidents and cataclysms that we get so many images of won't be regular occurrences. Perhaps the sense of dread that many of us feel might be replaced with hope.